So I'm going to assume that you are in the seat you wish to be in if you want to see. All right? If you're not in a seat, please don't block the aisles. So I want to say welcome to Missouri Republican Party's 2024 statewide Lincoln Days. I'm Nick Myers. I'm the chairman of the Missouri Republican Central Committee, which has a man and a woman. The committee consists of a man and a woman from each senatorial district in the entire state. So we are I like to think we're the glue that sort of holds the party together. The real glue and the real grassroots are at the county level, and I think you all should know that. If you don't know that, get involved in your county committee and help us win in November. So we are here today for the Governor's Forum that we're going to start here at about 1 o'clock. I will not be moderating this. We have the good fortune of having Dale Carter from Kansas City to be our moderator. I want to give you a little background on Dale before I bring him up here and let him go ahead and run the forum. So some of you may have heard Dale Carter's podcast, Dale Carter's America podcast. If you didn't hear him there, you can hear him on KFKF Morning Show, which he's been a co-host since 1997. And in 2022, Dale celebrated 25 years on the morning show, and that's in the Kansas City area on country music station. So Dale was elected to the Country Radio Hall of Fame in 2011. At 47, he was the youngest ever to be inducted into the Hall. So we have a very accomplished communicator and broadcaster here today. He's been a broadcaster since the age of 15. He's programmed country stations in Evansville, Indiana, Hartford, Connecticut, before spending the last 29 years here at KFKF in Kansas City. So Dale dedicates himself to involvement in his community, serving 3 terms on the Blue Springs, Missouri City Council. He spent 3 years as a member of the Jackson County Regional Rail Coalition. Are you in charge of the streetcar?
No, sir.
Okay. Enough said about that. So, and he's led the effort to renew the parks tax in Blue Springs. The successful conclusion of the parks tax campaign earned Dale the Truman Heartland Community Foundation Citizen of the Year Award and the Missouri Parks and Recreation Association Citation Award. So Dale is involved in the community as well as being a Hall of Fame broadcaster. And as if that was not enough, Dale is the stadium voice for the National Football League's Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah. And he just completed his 15th season behind the Arrowhead microphone. And with that, Dale, all I've got to say is, how about those Chiefs? Dale Carter.
What a pleasure to be here. They asked me if I'd ever done anything like this before, and I said, no, I've been one of the candidates in one of these forums, but I've never done this. But I've seen Brett Baer do it enough on Fox News Channel that I think I can get through this. So we are going to introduce the candidates. They drew in random order, and this is the order they're going to be introduced in. So please help me welcome to this area here, Missouri State Senator from St. Charles County, Bill Eigel. He is an Army veteran and a National Guardsman based. Oh, somebody got that wrong. Air Force veteran. All right. Are you helping one of your fellow candidates here?
I didn't know you talked about me.
The other guy. You got your intro. See, this thing's already off the rails. All right. He is an Army veteran and National Guardsman based out of Joplin. Please welcome Chris Wright, local businessman in Missouri. All right, we got Army and Air Force over here.
Yeah.
The third candidate we're going to introduce is the current Missouri Secretary of State, Mr. Jay Ashcroft. And the final candidate today is currently the Missouri Lieutenant Governor. Please welcome Mike Kehoe. All right, each candidate's going to start by giving a 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll move to the question round. Each candidate will be able to answer each question asked by me. Candidates will be given 90 seconds to answer each question. We have a designated timekeeper. So we'll keep everybody in line here. With 10 seconds remaining to complete your statement, you'll have a yellow card. You want to show them what that looks like? Looks like a file folder, actually. That's a big card. That's nice. Okay. We spent extra money on that. And then if you reach the end of the time, let them hear it. All right, you get the red card. Was it a soccer game? You get the red card and you get the bell over there. There won't be rebuttals allowed. Candidates will be allowed to not ask each other questions. Only I will ask the questions. Negative personal attacks on any other Republican candidate, present or not present, will not be permitted. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will be able to give a 2-minute closing statement. In the interest of time and allowing as many questions as possible to be asked, we would ask the audience to hold all applause or audible reactions until the end of the forum. But as we have these 4 gentlemen running for governor of Missouri right now, one time, give it up for them good and loud. All right, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We have an order of questions, and I'm going to start with crime. Obviously, I jumped the gun there, didn't I? See, I told you I haven't done this before. I know, it's twice now. Opening statements. Let's go to Senator Eigel first, your opening statement.
Awesome, thanks. All right, can everybody hear me? I'm State Senator Bill Eigel, and happy to be here. Want to welcome everybody here to the event. I know we've been looking forward to this. In short, I'm the anti-establishment candidate in this race for governor. I'll tell you what, I don't know if there's a single individual that makes the status quo, or we informally call it the swamp, more uncomfortable down in Jefferson City than I do. And I gotta tell you, I've been talking for the past 2 years about a reckoning that I think is coming for that status quo down in Jefferson City. And it's a reckoning for the powerful in Jefferson City that, quite frankly, I have watched for 7 years as a state senator do not care about the struggles that everyday Missourians are going through. They care more about the grift that they are benefiting from all the government we've got down in Jefferson City. And because of that, Missouri is stagnating. Missouri is falling behind other big red states led by other bold conservative governors, and we're missing an opportunity to be a leader in these United States. As I have traveled and put 60,000 miles on my truck over this past 2 years, I have heard from tens of thousands of Republicans who are tired and frustrated and angry with a supermajority, a lot of times, that doesn't do any of the big red Republican ideas that they campaign on every 2 years. So if you find yourself frustrated with Republicans in Jefferson City, what I want you to know is you're not alone. There are millions of Missourians, millions of Republicans just like you that want to see Missouri take its rightful place as a leader in these United States. Let's go Missouri in 2024.
Mr. Wright.
Excuse me. First of all, I want to thank everybody for attending, taking their time out of their day, out of their weekend, to come celebrate, to come look at your Republican leadership, to look at potential candidates, and I really thank you for being here. First and foremost, I want to recognize all the veterans, first responders, and teachers in this room, because you are what makes America work, and I'm very proud of you, and I thank you for what you do. So if you could stand and be recognized, because we have not done that yet this whole time. I will pick on you 3 or One thing that I do want to put out there, I'm running as governor, and I have zero accountability to the insiders and the lobbyists. I'm here to get work done. I'm here to do the right thing. I thank you for being here. And quickly, my background is not in politics. My background is 24 years in the military, 9 years in law enforcement, 17 years as a business owner. I'm just your regular, everyday, blue-collar type of guy, and I appreciate everybody being out here. Thank you.
All right. Secretary Ashbrook.
I've been requested, Jay, if everybody could stand when they speak.
Just under 60 years ago, President Ronald Reagan gave what we now call the time of choosing speech. As Republicans, we have a time of choosing as to what it will mean to be Republicans. Will we elect politicians that fix the blame? Will we elect an engineer that fixes problems? Will we elect Republicans that say they're in favor of tax cuts, but passed the largest tax cut in the history of the state 3 years ago? Will we elect Republicans that say they're for smaller government, but they've doubled our budget in the last 5 years? What are we going to be? As your Secretary of State, I've stood up against big government. I've stood for lower taxes. I've fought back against the federal government when they tried to send armed federal agents to our polling places in Missouri and said, no, we know how to run our own elections. A week and a half ago, I was at the United States Supreme Court pushing back against the states that wanted to throw Donald J. Trump off the ballot because they didn't like some of his tweets. We need to decide what we will be as a nation, whether or not this beacon of liberty in the world will continue for future generations. As governor, I'll make sure parents are in charge of their children's education. I will continue to fight to make sure you don't have to worry about what your kids are being shown in libraries. I've already pushed forth to make it wrong for them to have pornographic and obscene materials and use your taxpayer dollars to do that. I'm not just talking about things. I'm someone that gets things done. And that's what we need for the future of this state and the future of this country. I don't just talk about life. I have the sole endorsement from Missouri Right to Life because I've always stood for life. That's what I believe we need, and that's why I just politely ask for your vote on August 6th.
Lieutenant Governor Tebow.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for being here. This crowd is unbelievable, and it shows the interest that we have in the election. And like we said last night, we've always said every election that's coming up is the most important one. And I think for Missouri, there's a very clear choice and a very clear direction that people are going to say the way they want to go come August 6th and then eventually November. Claudia and I had the honor just in the last couple of months to visit with President Trump down in Florida, and then I actually went to his election party up in New Hampshire. And in those conversations, he talked about what he could do for America. You've heard him do that many times. But it caused me to reflect on how I got here today. It's the Trump America that we saw during 16 to 20 that afforded me the same opportunities as a young child with a single mother and no father in a very humbling beginning positions to pull ourselves up from the bootstraps and start working. I know what hard times is. I know what hard work is all about. I've been able to successfully create several different businesses and create hundreds of jobs along my journey through this life. It's been an unbelievably humbling journey to get there. And in public service, I've tried to recognize those same core conservative values as your state senator and now as your lieutenant governor. We backed the largest tax cuts in Missouri history, over $2.4 billion in tax cuts. I voted for every pro-life bill that's ever come across my desk, believing that we do have to protect innocent life. We protected your Second Amendment since I've been in office, and every step of the way we'll continue to do that. These are the things that make up real conservative actions, not just conservative rhetoric. And I think that's what Missouri wants to do. They want somebody who understands how to build relationships, who understands what it was like to run businesses, who understands what it takes to move Missouri forward. These are the values that I'll bring to office, and this is why I'm asking for your support in our journey. Thank you so much.
All right, gentlemen, when you are elected governor, you're going to be governor of a state with two of the most violent cities in America. With what happened in Kansas City at the Super Bowl festivities, it was horrible. how would you address the root causes of crime in order to prevent individuals from turning to criminal activity? And we'll start with Senator Eigel.
Yes, so great question. And so I think it's good to first acknowledge the tragedy. What was got to stay in the gym? It's like being on the Senate floor. First, I want to acknowledge the tragedy of what happened just a couple days ago here in Kansas City. I think that everybody understands that's a tragedy, and I don't know if anybody that is hoping or looking forward to any kind of day where we have more of those tragedies. That being said, it wasn't very long until our Democratic colleagues began using that tragedy as a reason to infringe upon our rights and call for more gun control. And the idea, and I want to be very clear about this, the idea that we're going to use tragedies like that as a reason to curtail people's rights or liberty in the state of Missouri, that is just not going to happen, and that is leftist garbage. Now, crime is something that is infecting our state right now. So I can give you two different answers. One, on the first day that I'm the governor of this state, I'm going to triple the highway patrol presence that's going on the highways leading into and out of both of the urban areas, both of which are led by regimes that are soft on crime, have had soft on crime policies for a generation that are devastating those areas. That's a policy that was actually already implemented by another Republican governor before this. I don't know why we got away from it, and it was putting thousands of criminals in jail. On the other hand, we're going to support our law enforcement. We're not going to let them defund our police departments. And we're going to make sure that we're doing everything to hold those regimes accountable if they're going to not protect the citizens that they were sworn to protect in the first place.
Mr. Ryan.
You know, this question is actually very simple, and it's like Bill alluded to. We have got to get back to supporting our law enforcement. The defund the police, I'm the only one up here that's ever been a police officer. I understand the struggles of being a police officer, and we have to make our police officers feel appreciated, feel loved, give them support, give them more training, get them better equipment, get them better pay. Whenever you harden, excuse me, whenever you are a hardened target, you are less likely to become a victim, and we've got to get that kind of mindset within our state. And like I said, it's very simple. Support our law enforcement, and it'll start getting better.
Secretary Ashcroft.
First and foremost, let's remember the families of the people that had family members injured or that had a family member die. That's a terrible thing for any family, and I think all of our hearts should go out there. Secondly, let's remember, I think we've all seen the video of a lone Kansas City individual seeing a suspect with a gun and deciding that he was willing to put his life on the line to protect others. Yes, it was a terrible day, but it should also remind us that there are great Americans and great Missourians that understand what matters in life, and that he was willing to put it on the line to protect others. When it comes to crime, I visit every county in the state every year. I don't know of anybody else that does that, maybe I'm crazy. But in 2022, I made it a point to talk to prosecutors, law enforcement officials, be it police officers, sheriffs, deputies. We talked about the need for truth in sentencing. We talked about the need for prosecutors that would prosecute crimes, because it's really simple. When you put criminals in jail, they quit committing crimes against the law-abiding citizens. I've worked on legislation with the Sheriff's Association for that. I've worked on legislation with the Prosecutors Association for that. We can do that. Just as catch and release doesn't work at the border, it doesn't work in Missouri. It's easy. Put the criminals behind bars and make sure that the law-abiding citizens of this state can feel safe.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Dale, for bringing that question forward, and thank you to the men and women in this room with the Kansas City Police Department, Kansas City firefighters. We have a bunch of heroes with us today who were in place at the right time on that tragic day. You know, when I take office, the first thing I'm going to do when my hand comes off the Bible is enact our Day One crime plan. Our Day One crime plan will have stakeholders from all around. It won't be growing bureaucracy. It will be taking existing folks that are in place that understand what crime is in our neighborhoods and bringing them together. We're going to build a crisis recruiting team to start recruiting law enforcement officers from one end of the state to the other to make sure they know Missouri is serious about crime and we're serious about protecting their backs. We're also going to seek the ability to remove these kind of George Soros-funded prosecutors across the state. They are a problem in our state. It's an absolute sin to literally have people coming into these liberal areas and actually coddling the criminals, letting them out of the jail before the paperwork is done from the police department. Those things are what it takes to be tough on crime, to make sure that we get our communities back. And I would add that we have the sole endorsement of Missouri FOP, that's 8,000 members. We have the International Association of Firefighters, and we have for the first time in 42 years, the Missouri State Highway Patrol Troopers Association and their 1,500 members endorsing us. They know I know what it takes to back up our claims, to get our communities back, to put safety back in our community, to get crime under control, and that's exactly what we'll do.
The next question, we will start with Mr. Wright. And Mr. Wright, due to the President's lack of leadership, our country has seen an unprecedented increase in illegal immigrants crossing our southern border. What policies would you advocate to ensure that our state's resources are prioritized for lawful residents and citizens?
You're absolutely right. The immigration crisis is unprecedented. It is awful, and it's not just illegal immigrants coming across. It's sex traffickers, it's drug cartels, it's terrorists, and we have to be proactive in the fight against it, because once they come across, once they get into the communities, you're not going to find them until they cause a crime, until they commit a crime. We've got to be proactive, and I like what we're doing now when we sent National Guard troops to support Texas at the border, but we got to send more. We have a force in the National Guard which is community driven. The National Guard's purpose is to protect the community, the nation. We got to send more to the border. We got to be proactive, stop them from coming across the border, because once they get across, it's too late. So we're going to be very, very proactive in sending more troops to the border to support Texas and the other states.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. I'm proud to say that I was the first person here to call for us to send troops to the border. It's really simple. The first thing I'll do as governor is, one, I'll declare an invasion. The United States Constitution requires the federal government to protect states from invasions, and the federal government isn't doing their job. Secondly, I'm going to call Governor Abbott in Texas and say, what can we do to help you? Texas is geographically a border state, but we are all border states. The fentanyl that is pouring across the border is the #1 killer of individuals from 18 to 44. Families across this state, across this nation, are losing loved ones because of that. We see human trafficking that's proliferating, and the cartels in Mexico and the Chinese government are pushing that and earning money off of it. Thirdly, as governor, I'll make sure that I faithfully execute the laws of this state so that we are not subsidizing illegal immigrants, so that your tax dollars are going to support Missourians and Americans and not what's going on at the border. It's a federal problem, but when the federal government won't stand up, the states need to stand up. And I'd also like to mention, I'm the only attorney up here. I've been in the United States Supreme Court twice in about the last year and a half. I'll not only be fighting to help Texas at the border, not only fighting to make sure we enforce the laws correctly in Missouri, but I'll be in court, because that's where the fight is, to make sure that the people of the United States and the people of Missouri are taken care of.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Well, as we said and you've heard, every state is a border state. You don't have to be bordering Mexico to worry about the immigration problems. There are some real problems happening in Missouri. The facts are we have 7,700 illegal immigrants living in Missouri right now. And in 2023 alone, it was over $460 million given to support those illegal immigrants. That's money that didn't go to our veterans, that's money that didn't go to our school teachers, that's money that didn't go back into your pockets. It absolutely is something we have to end right now. Under the Biden administration, what he's done is take the power away from the governor and the governors across the state, and all of a sudden he has let the drug cartels decide who's going to come into our country versus Americans who get to decide to come into our country in a legal way. This will be the #1 issue that we work on, but after we start solving the crime problem, because this also dovetails into it. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of our 18 to 44-year-olds across our country and here in Missouri. If you're a fentanyl seller, we're going to charge you with attempted murder. If you sell fentanyl and somebody dies, we're going to charge you with murder. We're going to make sure these criminals understand we're serious about being in Missouri and you're not welcome here. And last but not least, if you're a sanctuary city under my administration, the budget is not going to look kindly on you. We're not going to reward cities who want to take illegal immigrants in and house them and take resources away from our citizens.
So I actually agree with Secretary, because I've been out there talking for months, for years now, about the need to declare an invasion under Article 4 of the Missouri Constitution. And why is that important? That's important to do on day one because it will activate our highway patrol, every sheriff in this state, and our National Guard to be able to detain and deport folks who are in this state illegally. I also mentioned we're going to be deploying them along the highways that are being used as conduits because they're coming into this state using our urban areas with their soft on crime, soft on illegal immigration policies to get to the other areas of our state. We're going to catch them, and I'm going to use a few of those extra dollars down in Jefferson City to buy a fleet of buses. And if I have to drive those buses myself, we're taking them back to the border of this country, and we're going to work with other governors that are bold and want to do the same thing. But let me tell you what else, and we touched on this a couple times. These are the same conduits of criminal activity. We mentioned the fentanyl trade, we mentioned the human trafficking trade, going after the liberal regimes that don't value life, that don't value your rights, that are not protecting their citizens right now in the urban, most populous areas of the state, or we're going to focus, and we're going to use every tool at our disposal, whether it's withholding dollars that they're desperate to get from Jefferson City, whether it's sending in our law enforcement and our National Guard to remove the criminals by force. We're going to be aggressive about that, and we're going to set the standard here in the state of Missouri.
All right, the next question for you guys, it's the other I word out there. Immigration is one, infrastructure is the other. We'll start with you, Secretary Ashcroft. What do you see as Missouri's most immediate needs when it comes to upgrading and maintaining our infrastructure throughout the state?
Well, I think the biggest need that we have is our inland waterways with infrastructure, because we have infrastructure that could help commerce, both bringing in goods and exporting goods, and we really haven't done anything with that. So I think that'd be a great thing to do. But I also think it's wrong to talk about infrastructure and only talk about roads and inland waterways. The best infrastructure of our state is our people. That's what makes Missouri great. And to do that, we need education. We need to make sure that every child in this state has the opportunity to get challenging education. You do that by putting parents in charge of education instead of bureaucrats that don't know. Fewer than 25% of 8th graders in this state are proficient in math and reading. That's not how you have a good state. That's not how you prepare people so that they can fulfill the maximum of their God-given potential. We've got to get crime under control so that we can have people that aren't scared to live where they are and can go about their business and do the best that they can do. That's what we really need to focus on. We need to make sure that people have the opportunity to be their best.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Well, if there's one thing that caused me to step away temporarily from small business and get into politics, it was infrastructure and transportation. I was fortunate under Governor Blunt to serve on the Missouri and Highway Transportation Commission and eventually as chairman as a volunteer. It's an unpaid job, but it's a very important job. You know, while I was on the Highway Commission, when I started in 2005, Missouri was ranked 28th in road quality. And when I got off, we moved all the way up to 8th in road quality. So there is ways to make sure our transportation infrastructure continues to move forward. The very critical project that was just passed in the legislature was the rebuilding of I-70. After yesterday's snowstorm, I'm sure many people in the room can agree that's necessary. As governor, I want to make sure that gets done, number one, on time and on budget. 6 laning 70 from St. Louis to Kansas City is critical to our population. 60% of Missourians live either 30 miles north or 30 miles south of that infrastructure. And when we're finished with 70, as governor, I want to immediately start on I-44. That roadbed is as old as 70 is, and the traffic volumes have caught up to that. And what that means is we free up resources to plow into rural roads, to make sure our farm to market roads, the roads that our agricultural families depend on as the #1 industry in our state, we got to make sure that those roads are right. And last, we are the house on the beach when it comes to transportation for economic development. We are right in the center of the country with the 2nd, 3rd largest rail hubs, the largest interstate system, rivers and river ports. 4 of our 5 major airports have rebuilt in the last couple of years. We'll be ready to go for economic development.
Senator.
So I'm sure it's not going to be a surprise to anyone to hear all 4 of the candidates come out and say they're going to support more construction and more renovations of our critical road and bridge infrastructure. But what you're not going to hear about anybody from me is a willingness to go into the tax dollars that you are already sending to Jefferson City and secure the efficiencies in the most bloated state budget we've ever had, so that we can actually get many more roads and bridges into workable conditions. And by the way, and we want to talk about infrastructure. We need to put a couple things out there on the table. Many of you here, Republican Party supporters, we have doubled the size of our state budget in the past 5 years. Doubled the size. We have grown the budget more in 5 years than every Democratic governor going back to the founding of the state combined. Does that sound like what you were promised in campaign season?
No.
Absolutely not. That's not what you were promised. But I tell you what, if we had a leader in charge of that budget, if we had a leader that was willing to go out there and cut out all the special checks for the special interests, we could not only fix I-70, we could fix 44, 55, and every one of the other major highways in the state without making it more expensive for you to pay for gas at the pump every day. So that's the Missouri I'm talking about. And if we have the courage to say no to the status quo, that doesn't care that it costs more, maybe than it ever has before, to buy gas in this state, that doesn't care that you're struggling to meet those ends meet, then we're going to get to that Missouri sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Mr. Wright.
Just like all the other candidates, you know, the roads are important, the waterways are important, but the one thing that I focus my campaign on that is absolutely vital is our electric grid. You look at the solar power, the windmills, that is not the answer. The new green energy deal is not the answer. We have people all over the state, over 4 million Missourians are getting decimated in their pocketbook with outrageous utility bills. As governor, I'm going to look for a focus toward nuclear power. It's safer, it's cleaner, and it's more powerful, so I will put a major focus on the electric grid.
All right, gentlemen, next up, we talk about the economy in a couple of different ways, and we're going to start with the Lieutenant Governor first. Missouri often has to compete with border states to attract businesses to our state. What specific policies or initiatives would you propose as governor to stimulate economic growth and bring high-quality jobs to Missouri?
Well, great. As I mentioned in the beginning, 35 years in small business. I've been fortunate enough to build several different businesses across the state, employ hundreds of Missourians. I would suggest that I'm probably the only person up here that has done that much and provided that many jobs. Many of us have signed both sides of the paycheck, but you know what that's like. You have to understand what it is to invest and put risk capital out before you start saying, here's how we grow the economy. We're going to grow the economy like nobody's ever seen when I'm governor, because I do understand what it's going to take to do that. We have to get into a competitive environment that would allow existing businesses to grow, and then at the same time let other businesses know what it takes to be in Missouri. Infrastructure that we just talked about is very important to that. But I just got back from a trade mission in Europe just a few months ago, and I talked to 10 different companies, 5 with a presence here, 5 thinking about coming here. The number one question from every one of them is, what do you do to providing me a trained workforce? So as we grow our economy and expand our existing businesses and bring new businesses in, we got to make sure our young men and ladies are ready to go into the workforce and they're trained for those businesses we're asking to spend risk capital and to grow here. You know, I was afforded a lot of opportunities to get to the position I'm in right now. And I understand what that's going to take to continue to grow and give other Missourians those same opportunities. This is what we were built on, this is what we'll be the best on, and we will know how to grow the economy.
Senator?
Well, I'll tell you, there weren't many specifics in that answer, so let me give you a specific. Under the Nigel administration, I tell you now, we are getting rid of personal property tax in the state of Missouri. And we're going to join the 29 other states that have already figured out that you can't fund services by charging people rent for the crime of owning a car. You know what Texas, Tennessee, and Florida don't have that we do that are holding us back? Personal property tax. And it's not, getting rid of it is not a function of whether or not government is getting enough of your cash right now. Government has never had more of your cash right now, and adjusted for inflation, it's suffocating this state. And when we're done with personal property tax, we're going to get rid of the income tax. And we're going to get rid of these forms of taxation by getting rid of all the grift that is benefiting a powerful few in Jefferson City. And I tell you what, if you're out there and you're upset about the tax burden that's holding the state back, you ought to be. Because when your tax assessments on your real estate are going up 35 or 40%, you ought to know that government's never had it better. Government's never spent more of your money. Government's never told you more what you have to do or what you can do with your property. And that's why folks aren't moving to Missouri. All of that's going to change when we start kicking over the apple carts of the special few that have benefited from all this government spending over the past 5 years. The reckoning is coming, folks. It's happening in just a few months.
Mr. Wright.
So as I've mentioned mentioned before, I'm a big skilled trades guy, and if you look at the gap between what we have in our very near future to the older generation, you know, everything around us, all our infrastructure, it's built on blue-collar workers, the skilled trade, and we've got to put an emphasis on skilled trade, because if we don't have skilled trade, we don't have anything. We don't have all the amenities that we enjoy. And so, you know, go back to the high school where, you know, instead of pushing all this DEI nonsense and whatnot, let's go back to the basics where we have shop classes, where we have kids who are wanting to learn how to use your hands, how to use your critical thinking skills. And I think that's vital with the economy, because whenever you can build things, build businesses, infrastructure, that brings in the money, and that's when I'm going to put a focus on skilled trades.
All right, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. You know, when I first heard the question, I was a little concerned that somebody had been listening to Barack Obama. Because we build companies, not government. And what we need is government to get out of the way. And we really need to decide, do we want the same people that have doubled the budget in the last 5 years? Is that going to help us create a good economy in Missouri, good jobs? It won't. Do we want people that pass the largest tax increase in the history of the state in the last 3 years? That will not help us build jobs. We need to cut regulation. We need to make it easier for jobs to come here. We need people to know that if they come here, there will be workers that know how to think because they've been educated and taught to think. Not workforce development trained them to just work for one thing, but they've been taught how to think so they can make their own decisions. We've got to get crime under control. You know, the biggest problem for Missouri right now when we want businesses to move to Missouri is their employees Google Missouri. They Google St. Louis. And they say, my kid's not going to be able to get a good education. The crime is rampant. That's how we get companies that are willing to come here. We've got to get government out of the way. Government never builds it, and it's worse when the government talks about shovel-ready jobs, because I think we all know what they're shoveling when they talk about that.
All right, the second question under the economy. We're talking a lot about the cities, but Missouri's made up of a lot of ag and rural areas. What steps would you take to protect and promote the interests of agricultural and rural communities? And Senator Eigel, this one comes to you.
Yeah, I would say that first you guys got to understand, we all need to understand that the same policies that are good for our urban areas are good for our rural areas. And stop trying to classify this into a, well, we're just going to do something that we think is good for one or the other. When I talk about getting rid of personal property tax, that's the property tax that you're paying on your car. It's also the property tax that farmers are paying on their combines and their tractors. It's things that are holding this state back. Everybody in this state that is producing is paying an income tax. And those are the policies that other big red states, led by those big, bold, conservative governors, all of whom, you know their names, have been doing and we've been not doing. And instead what we've been doing is we've been making government bigger. The status quo has been making government bigger by co-opting too many of the Republicans that were sent down to Jefferson City to do something else. So whether it's cutting personal property tax, eliminating it, and getting rid of income tax, whether it's protecting our farmland. You want to help farmers out? Let's stop China or any other foreign country from buying up the food supply and controlling the food in this state and around this country. Standing up and protecting the rights of our citizens has always been the proper role of government. But we're going to have to take on the powerful in Jefferson City to do it. I have made a career of every single day I'm in the Senate of making those special interests uncomfortable. And when I'm the governor of this state, I'm going to take the slings and arrows from that status quo, that swamp, on behalf of every single one of the 6 million Missourians that live here.
Mr. Wright.
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. What steps would you take to protect and promote the interests of agricultural and rural communities?
So as I travel, one of the things that I'm noticing is there's, again, this age gap in between farmers, your old school farmers, your old time farmers, and new people that are getting interested in farming. We're losing a lot of family farms. We're losing, what's very important to Missouri, and that being the agricultural industry. And, trying to get a bank loan for anything is ridiculous. Interest rates are sky high. So we need to provide maybe some easier support, less red tape for those new farmers, those new families that are trying to get those loans to start or continue their family farm. So I really want to cut the bureaucracy when it comes to trying to get a grant. Let's make more grants available. Let's make it easier to get funding for these farms so that we can continue to farm.
All right, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. There are a lot of things that we can do that really we need the government to get out of the way. We need to allow people to do their jobs rurally if they want through the use of broadband. I talked earlier about inland waterways for allowing us to transport goods in and out. I have a friend that has a lumber mill over in the Far East, and it costs him more money to ship lumber from Southwest Missouri to the Gulf of Mexico than it does for him to ship lumber that he cuts in Georgia all the way to the Far East because of transportation problems. We need to work on that. You know, we talk about foreign ownership of land. I led that fight in the legislature the prior year. Just look at Senate Bill 55. Look at House Bill 903. Senate Bill 55 would have prohibited any foreign ownership of land. The Senate didn't even let it out of committee. House Bill 903 at least would have stopped China and other countries like it from buying any land in our state. It got to the Senate, and for some reason the Senate amended it to allow any foreign government to buy as much of our land as they want and even use it for human genetic testing. We need to stand up to create the environment where individuals, wherever they are in our state, can make their own decisions. We need to look at telemedicine. We need to look at virtual education. No, I think it's better if kids are in school. We saw how bad virtual education can be during COVID, but we need to make sure no matter where you are in this state, you can get good health care and you can get a good education.
Mr. Lieutenant.
Well, protecting agriculture has got to be the number one concern from an economic issue that anybody in leadership in this state does. Agriculture is our number one industry at $93 billion impact to our state's economy. We're number 2 in the United States at 95,000 family-owned farms. So making sure we continue to feed and clothe the world has got to be something that we can't let out of our sights. It's who we are as a state. And as governor, what we're going to do is take the lessons I've learned as a first-generation farmer. 35 years, Claudia and I have been in the cow-calf business, and we've worked with rural organizations all across the state to make sure we understand what it takes to grow our ag economy and not forget them. So in agriculture, we've got to go down the value-added road. We've got to figure out how to get more out of the state with the land that we have. We're not annexing other states. We need to produce more within these states. Projects like the American Food Group's billion-dollar investment in Warren County, adding 1,400 jobs is a great example that's under construction right now that we brought here out of Wisconsin in a family-owned business. And in rural Missouri, if you're going to keep people in rural Missouri, you're going to have to concentrate on 2 other things. You're going to have to concentrate on rural health care. It's a crisis across our state. It's a big crisis in our rural parts of our state. And then you're going to have to make sure you get them broadband access so they can have access to telehealth, to education, to other opportunities that those farm families are so much depending on, and that keeps the young people in those communities as well. We have to make sure that they have access to that technology.
All right, gentlemen, we're making good time here. We're going to move to the next section, which is under the category of additional questions, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Wright. How do you plan to address issues of taxation and government spending to enhance accountability, transparency, and efficiency?
Well, like we've talked about before, we've got a record-setting budget, and one of the powers of the governor's line item veto authority, and we've just got to go through and get all the ridiculous things that are in there. And I always make an example, which really isn't in there, but if there is $20 million for hummingbird research through the University of Missouri, that doesn't need to be in there. That's not the taxpayer burden. Our taxes are supposed to pay for infrastructure, for public safety, and I'm really big about accountability and being open and transparent about it's our taxpayer money that's being spent. We should be able to see where that's going, and we should have more of a say in it. And I just hate spending. I'm not a big spender. It just drives me nuts, and it's common sense, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out right is right, wrong is wrong. Let's just stop wasting our money.
All right. Mr. Secretary.
Once again, we need to make a decision. Do we want people that'll say they're for lower taxes, that'll pass the largest tax increase in the history of the state? And not only was it the largest increase in the history of the state, but it totally made those tax dollars unaccountable to your elected legislators. Because under the Missouri court rules, what they've ruled is that those funds that go into the road fund Your legislators have no ability to decide how they're used. There is no elected individual that's accountable for how those funds are used. I think the most important thing we need to have in government is accountability. And when people talk about wanting to have low taxes, you can't have low taxes and double and triple the size of your government. It doesn't work. When people say they want lower taxes, but they grow your government, well, they're just saying something that just ain't true. The people that really understand that know you have to cut the size and scope of government. I believe we need a governor that will focus on three things: education funding as required by our Constitution, roads, bridges, and inland waterways, and public safety. That's what we should be using general revenue dollars for. Those are the only things we should be using general revenue dollars for. And if the people of this state at a November general election want a tax increase for doing other stuff, which I would say is a bad idea, they can make that decision. We should never have another tax increase in this state without the people voting affirmatively for it.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Well, first of all, I'd have to say that the budget money is yours, not ours. And government is like horses. If you put food in front of them, they're going to eat until they can't stand it anymore. It's an insatiable appetite. You can spend your money better than any government official ever can. So putting money back in the Missourians' pockets is where I've been. You know, we just saw, like the Kansas City Chiefs, my record is backing $2.4 billion in tax cuts since the time I've been in the Capitol. Making sure your money goes in your pockets to spend it more wisely than we ever can. As a small businessman and a career small businessman, I understand budgets. So we understand how to make those tough decisions to make sure the core functions of government get funded and that we grow our state's economy and make sure Missourians have what it takes to pay their bills. They're no different than anybody else across the state. They've got to look at what their household budget is. We have to look at what our household budget is. We put more in the budget on the bottom line this year than we ever have to give back to Missourians in reserve, and we want to continue to do that. Your money is your money, and I want to make sure you get it back.
Senator.
So my policies on taxes and spending are cut them both. We've never had as large of a tax burden as we have in this state right now. By the way, to have somebody stand up on this stage today who has backed the largest tax increases in Missouri history, try to present themselves as a tax cutter, that's why people hate politicians, folks. That's why people hate politicians. But I'm telling you what, I've already told you that I want to get rid of personal property tax and I want to get rid of income tax. You'll notice how nobody else on this stage has endorsed that idea because they don't have specifics. They talk about cutting spending, they don't have specifics. I've seen these monstrosities come through the Senate because I've been the one voting against them. And when I talk about cutting the spending, I'm going to get rid of things like the $10 billion of new decision items and pork spending that showed up on our budget last year. I've been calling these budgets making earmarks great again. That's what's happening in our state budget. We spent tens of millions of dollars on a synthetic meat laboratory, tens and dozens of millions of dollars on professional sports stadiums upgrades. We spent tens of millions of dollars on a concrete walking path built over the top of I-70 in Kansas City. And the reason that you don't hear any of these specific examples from any of the other candidates on this stage today is because they have no idea how they would cut spending. I'm going to go after the $1 billion of waste in our Medicaid program that an audit found years ago. And when we're done cutting out all the waste, Missouri's going to lead this country.
Secretary Ashcroft, we move into the final question here. How can Missouri better support our veterans and active duty military personnel?
You know, the first thing we need to do is we need to do what we promised them. That's really clear. But, you know, this isn't really probably what you want for your answer for your question, but I don't think we ought to treat people based on classifications. I think we ought to treat everybody equally. And I don't think we ought to say that if you live here, we're going to charge you this, but if you live here, we charge you this. I don't think we ought to say if you're in the military, we give you this discount, but everybody else has to pay twice as much. I don't think that's good government. I think what we ought to say is if you're a Missourian, if you're an American, the law applies equally. You know, there have been times when people have said, why don't we do this in the Secretary of State's office? Because, you know, when you're a military individual and you move, it's harder sometimes to get licensed and make sure you have licensing reciprocity. What I've always said is, why don't we just make that rule for everybody? Why don't we just say that government is the problem and let's get government out of the way, let people make their own decisions and not be picking and choosing winners and losers. I appreciate veterans. I have veterans in my family. I like what they've done. But what we ought to do is say, if it's good for veterans, it's good to do it for everyone.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Well, first of all, I appreciate Chris recognizing the veterans in the room, and Chris and Bill, both for their service to our country. Through state statute, the Missouri Lieutenant Governor's Office is the advocate for veterans. So we've spent the last 6 years in our official capacity making sure we work with veterans organizations across the state. Missouri is 5th or 6th, depending on the day you rank it, on veterans in our state. We have about 475,000 heroes that live here, and taking care of them has to be our #1 priority. Under our administration, for the first time ever, Missouri now has a Veterans Hall of Fame in our state's capital. We set up a separate board. Thank you. They deserve it. We set up a separate board of people that look at the heroes that have served our states, and I'm proud to say we work with American Legion and VFW to buy the plaques, to get that established in our capital, and now are in our 3rd year of putting veterans into our Hall of Fame. Under our leadership through the Veterans Commission, we've worked very much to work with the mental illness that we have with veterans across the state. It is one of the #1 illnesses that we've had for returning veterans, especially as we get out of the Vietnam era and into the Gulf era. We've got to support organizations like Honor Flight. I'm proud to be a guardian on Honor Flight. Been on several trips out to Washington, D.C., where you listen to the men and ladies who have served our country and find out what their challenges are. Mental issues, homelessness, dealing with the government in all different levels and how frustrating that is. Those are the things we got to make sure we do. The heroes of our country have to be our #1 priority and will always be under my governorship.
Senator.
So, honestly, I'm a little stunned to hear one of the candidates up here say he's really not interested in looking into veterans issues or helping them out. I tell you what, I've been the chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Senate up until recently for the past few years in the state of Missouri, when I also lost my parking spot. But I tell you what, I've got legislation right now that would protect our National Guard troops from having to get the COVID-19 shot. I think that's something we ought to support. I think I've got a bill that would alleviate income taxes on National Guard signing bonuses. I think we ought to do that as well. I've got that same bill would prevent foreign countries from buying farmland near our military installations to help keep those individuals safe. Why don't we do that to help out the veterans in this state? And yet, I'm willing to bet right now that the other 3 members on this stage don't even know what bill I'm talking about, because they're not engaged in those specific issues, and they're giving you talking points. I'm giving you specifics. And you're darn right, we're gonna lower the tax burden on every person in this state, and we're gonna be bold about it. But I'm gonna tell you what, there are folks in our military service that need our help, especially our National Guard, which are subject to some of the rules and regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., that even the rest of us don't have to contend with. So we're going to protect them. We're going to protect the rights of everybody in this state, and we can be a place where veterans can prosper as well.
I have a lot to say, but I'm going to keep it brief. Some of the things that my opponents have said are absolutely true. They're right in that. But the biggest thing as a current military member that we face in Missouri, we're going to go back to the COVID-19 shot. If you want to get the shot, get it. If you don't, you shouldn't be mandated to get it. I personally had to fight against the military on my own. I had no help from my state leadership when Washington, D.C., when the National Guard Bureau said, hey, you're getting a COVID shot. I am not getting that COVID shot. I had to go through the rigmarole to fight against this shot on my own. And it is absolutely imperative that we work on getting the federal government out of our National Guardsmen. Yes, I know the question was about active duty, but that is not a state issue. That's a federal issue. We need to focus on the National Guardsmen. And it's not because I'm part of the National Guard. It's because I know what the men and women in the National Guard have to go against the federal government. And we all know in this room, there's nothing good coming out of that federal government. So the answer how to help us National Guardsmen, everybody at this table had a little bit of piece of what it was. But the most important thing is get the federal government out of our business. Our job is to protect the state, to take care of our communities and the state, and that's my biggest one. I'm out of time. Okay.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on to closing statements now, and following the order that we're under right now, we're going to start with you, Lieutenant Governor Kehoe. 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for the people in this room for helping us on our journey so far. Dale, thank you for moderating. You know, under Mike Kehoe for governorship, we are going to follow a conservative agenda. We're going to work with President Trump and make sure that the border wall gets rebuilt, that our economy gets back going, that crime in our communities goes down. Our day one crime plan will absolutely address that immediately. We're going to work with the men and ladies in law enforcement to make sure that happens. We're going to continue to work on making sure you get more money back into your pockets. They can say all they want to say up here, 2.4 billion reasons I can tell you that I've backed to get money back in your pocket. That's a fact. That's something that can't be disputed, and you're welcome to go check that out. Missouri is a great place that offered a lot of people in this room, including myself, opportunities. I'm not a professional politician. This is not something I dreamed about ever doing. This is something I feel in my heart that Claudia and I feel like we should be able to give back to Missouri and let you have the same opportunities that we've had, and let your kids and grandkids have that same opportunity. Government is not super smart. They don't need to tell you what to do every day. They need to get out of your way and let you grow and prosper. And I need your help. I could not be here today without many people in this room, and I'm grateful for that and will always be grateful. I'm grateful for Claudia by my side. She has been an unbelievable stalwart for 34 years, the mother of 4 of our children, and I would not be here without her. Many people in that room, when I go to your community, say, "Where's Claudia? We like her better than you." I don't blame you. Most people do. But I need your help. A couple hands got raised there. I'd love you to go to MikeKehoe.com and check out our website, check out our launch video, see what you can do to help our campaign. We're running for August 6th, and then we're going to run for November. We plan on winning both of those elections and being your next governor, and I'd love to have you help us by our side. And last but not least, I will not be with you tonight. I'm going to be with the men and ladies of the Kansas City Police Department, honoring them for their service, along with the rest of our first responders. I'd ask you to keep all of our first responders in our prayers as they go through protecting our communities. God bless.
All right. Senator Rockwell, 2 minutes.
So my background is a military veteran who served in the Air Force for 8 years. In fact, my wife Amanda also served as an aircraft maintenance officer alongside. And then we became small business owners outside of St. Louis, where we got a chance to pursue the American dream. And, you know, I never thought about politics. But when I was avoiding politics and government as a small business owner, I failed to realize that if you're not thinking about government, government's thinking about you. Government's thinking about how it can take more from you. It's thinking about how it can infringe upon your rights. And so I got involved with politics when I realized that our government is out of control and there's a reckoning needed all over this country. And I think that I got into this just like millions of Missourians are getting into this political discussion right now because of everything that is wrong in our government. Everything that they're hearing from politicians and all the broken promises that they're tired of seeing. And I'm here to tell you, if you're one of those folks that are angry and frustrated, don't be afraid of the message that we can't take our state back because I don't have enough lobbyist money or I don't have the right last name for my dad. We are going to take this state back. We are going to be leaders in these United States. And I'm ready to go. Let's go, Missouri.
Mr. Wright, 2 minutes.
As everybody in this room can tell, I'm a man of few words. I just don't like talking. I like doing. My closing statement's the same as my opening. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking your time out. I will leave you with this. There's a lot of talk up here. There's a lot of words. There are a lot of answers. Boils down to do your research. Research people. Don't just take them for word. Follow the money. Do your research. Pay attention. Be involved. And most importantly, as a Republican Party, because we fight a lot, we have got to band together. Make a joke about this when I talk. The Democrats, if they think it's a good idea to band together and fight the Cookie Monster, that's what they do. As ridiculous as it sounds, so we've got to stick together as Republicans. We're all good candidates up here. Some people are going to choose one or the other for a variety of reasons, but again, we've got to stop fighting and stick together.
Senator Ashcroft, final 2 minutes to you.
I grew up in a political family. 17-year-old, I said, I'm not going into politics. I'm not going to go to law school. I'm going to get a real job. There actually are civil engineers. I'm not sure there are civil attorneys. Somehow I ended up here. I ended up here because I had a family and I lived in St. Louis, and I saw who was running on the Republican ticket. And I said, we can do better. That was about 10 years ago. And now I'm afraid we must do better. As I talked, now was the time for choosing. Are we going to pick words, or are we going to pick actions? People can talk about cutting taxes, but the end result, they've raised taxes. People can talk about wanting small government, but in the end result, they've grown our government, they've doubled it in the last 5 years. They can talk about things, but look at what they've done. Look at what I've done with our elections to make sure that Missouri is the gold standard with our elections. Look at my willingness to stand up to the federal government when they tried to send federal agents to our polling places, and I said no. Look at what I've done to protect kids from pornography and obscene materials in our libraries. Our legislature refused to act. I did not. Look at what I did to make sure that your investment dollars are used the way you want them to. When the legislature refused to act, I still promulgated a rule and said, in Missouri, your money will be protected. There's a lot of talk about foreign ownership of land. Go read Senate Bill 55, read HB 903. I actually had the plan to do it. People talk about crime. We had the plan with the Sheriff's Association on truth and sentence. We had the plan with the Prosecutors Association on how we make sure prosecutors will actually combat crime. I don't talk about education because it's a new thing. I started a legislative retreat on education 7 years ago. If you want things done, I need your help on August 6th. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the future governor of the state of Missouri is right in front of you. One of these four gentlemen, please stand up and give them a huge round of applause. Jay Ashcroft, Mike Kehoe, Bill Eigel, Chris Wright. Nice job, gentlemen.